First, it seemed like the perfect crime, Britain's biggest burglary, millions of pounds stolen from under the feet of London's diamond dealers. But in fact, the ageing thieves were struggling with infirmity, even incontinence, and left a trail of CCTV evidence for the flying squad to follow. Brian Reeder, Terry Perkins, Danny Jones and Kenny Collins pleaded guilty last year. Today, Carl Wood and Billy Lincoln were convicted by a jury. Hugh Doyle was found guilty of helping to move the stolen property. Like so many infamous crimes, it was plotted in a London pub, a group of old-school thieves planning one last job. The ageing gang let themselves in through a back door and down the fire escape before using a lift shaft to crawl into the Hatton Garden safe deposit. They then bored their way into the vault with a giant diamond-tipped drill. But the smashed alarm still got a signal out. Security guard Kelvin Stockwell was called from home. He checked the external doors, but as police hadn't responded to the alarm, he left as the drilling continued beneath his feet.
I could have walked in and I don't know what would have happened to me. I could have got clumped across the head or got tied up, whatever.
The next morning, the gang drove off in their van, having failed to break into the vault. But 2 nights later, they returned, and this time they got in.
We couldn't resist seeing how easy it was to actually get through. I'm told it's possible. It looks very, very, very tight.
I'm also told the best way to do it is to use the Superman pose.
So I'm going to put my right hand through first.
That is difficult.
I think you need to be pushed from behind. Someone needs to give me a bit of a push. Okay, I've got my hand out now. Once that hand's out, it's possible to crawl out. There you are.
2 of the Hatton gang squeezed into the vault. 60-year-old Danny Jones and an unidentified man called Basil. They broke into 73 safe deposit boxes. The thieves made off with £14 million worth of gold, diamonds and jewellery. Many of their 40 victims were uninsured, like Sammy Akiva,
I had offices here in the corner.
who lost hundreds of thousands of pounds.
The police told me, unfortunately, your box is being broken. And honestly, I didn't know where I am. I was screaming. And look what's happened to me. I'm still feel dizzy all the time and take a lot of medication.
At first, the police struggled. But this distinctive white Mercedes caught on CCTV led them to lifelong criminal Kenny Collins and then 2 infamous thieves, Brian Reeder and Terry Perkins, filmed here on a police surveillance video reenacting part of the burglary. Detectives then put listening devices in 2 of the gang's cars.
Audio recordings that we managed to obtain from the vehicles. These were tantamount to confessions by the gang.
And as the men tried to move their loot, detectives were watching and caught them red-handed. All except one. Basil, who was heavily disguised during the job and who the gang only ever referred to using his first name, has never been identified. He is still missing, along with £10 million. Daniel Sanford, BBC News, Hatton Garden.
Well, the gang were described by police as career criminals. Some of them had been involved in the most notorious robberies of recent years, including the Brinks-Mat gold bullion heist. Daniela Relf looks back now at their criminal pasts.
Hardly the usual suspects, a combined age of 278. When others would be enjoying retirement, these 4 men were plotting a daring heist. Brian Reeder was the one the others called the Master. The oldest, he even used a free bus pass to get to Hatton Garden. The CCTV placed him at the scene, disguised as a workman. And Reeder came with experience.
Brian Reeder appeared in the dock handcuffed to plainclothes police officers.
Decades earlier, the notorious £26 million Brinks-Mat robbery from a warehouse at Heathrow. He was sentenced to 8 years in jail for handling stolen gold bullion. Brinks-Mat also brought Reeder together with notorious criminal Kenneth Noy. They were both cleared of murdering a police officer who'd been investigating the Brinks-Mat case. But detectives believe the pair remained known associates. Terry Perkins celebrated his 67th birthday during the burglary. Here on CCTV pushing a wheelie bin full of stolen jewels. A diabetic, he brought his medication in with him. He said without it, he would have been the one taken out in a bin. He too had a criminal past, sentenced to 22 years for his part in the £6 million raid on the Security Express headquarters in East London. The detective who helped convict him is astonished at his latest crime.
I was absolutely flabbergasted because I would have thought he would have learnt a lesson and retired and got on with his property letting, but obviously he decided to have one more go for his pension.
74-year-old Kenny Collins was the lookout on the night of the burglary, although some of the group claimed he fell asleep during his lookout duties. He'd also helped plan the heist and the aftermath, and often brought his dog Dempsey with him. Danny Jones was described in court as the eccentric, a Walter Mitty character who liked to wear a fez and his mother's dressing gown to bed. At 60 years old, he was the youngest of the four, here on a walkie-talkie outside the vault, appearing to coordinate events. The raid here at Hatton Garden over the Easter weekend was bold but flawed. For the gang, it brought excitement and the possibility of status, notoriety and millions of pounds. And that made it worth the risk. They just couldn't resist, even at their age. But their final crime was too ambitious. They were too naive. This group of unusual suspects couldn't quite pull it off. Daniela Ralph, BBC News, Hatton Garden.
Well, let's go back to Daniel Sanford, who's at Hatton Garden for us now. And Daniel, some of these men may have had the appearance of being quiet pensioners, but in fact they had a violent past.
Yes, Rita, there have been amusing aspects to this case, but for the victims it's been a financial disaster, and for the flying squad detectives it's been personal, because the oldest man in the gang, Brian Reeder, was right there on the night in 1983 when undercover officer Detective Constable John Fordham was brutally stabbed to death by Kenny Noy, and although he was cleared of the murder, the death of undercover officer John Fordham has always cast a shadow over that Brinksmat investigation. And Brian Reeder wasn't the only one of this gang to have a violent past. That armed robbery that Terry Perkins was convicted of involved pouring petrol over a security guard and threatening to set him alight. So yes, this burglary was audacious, although in the end deeply flawed, and although it didn't involve any violence, it was carried out by violent men. Rita.
Daniel, thank you. Daniel Sanford there. The group calling itself Islamic State has said it was behind the gun and bomb attack on the Indonesian capital, Jakarta, today. 5 militants and 2 civilians were killed in the assault, which targeted a business and shopping district in Jakarta. Police and security forces battled with the gunmen for hours. Our Asia correspondent Jonathan Head is at the scene for us tonight. Jonathan.
Well, Rita, this country has the world's largest Muslim population. It has a tradition of tolerance. It's a pluralistic society, but there's long been a violent, militant, fringe